Well, hello. Uh, gosh, yesterday I made a video and I talked for over an hour. And I was talking about this article that I came across by Stahl Holgerson, where he's talking about growth or degrowth. Eco-socialism confronts a false dichotomy. And I think it's an interesting article. I'm interested in things like this because I'm interested in alternative ways of uh, running the global social economic system that don't um, destroy uh, ecology and people's lives and all that kind of thing. So, ecocide and genocide and war and just basic ill health, sickness, you know, depression, addiction, all these kinds of things. And when I go on and on about it, um, my brain works in such a weird way, my trains of thought, because I've read a lot of things and, it's all jumbled up inside my head, my thought processes, and I'm no Noam Chomsky, okay? I don't have that kind of memory. I'm not an academic. I'm not deep in the weeds on a particular subject. I'm a generalist, intellectually speaking, and I like all kinds of things. So, of course, I look into what is communism, what is socialism. Anything that I'm curious about, I'm always thinking like, what do they want? Why do they want it? How are they going to get it? Type of questions. And the same goes for me. What do I want? Why do I want it? How am I going to get it? And I try to create a broader, deeper context for what I'm thinking so that I can, you know, have greater agency, uh, approach things with more wisdom and maturity. And anyway, my brain, even now, it's working too fast. So there's too many things going on. So if I'm cool, I script this whole thing out and I read a teleprompter and make it visually interesting. And then I have some editors help me find graphs and graphics and photographs that punctuate the narrative. Now, one guy who's done this extremely well.
Wouldn't come until the US got involved with World War II. To say that the war effort stimulated the American economy would be a vast understatement, but this was under a closely guiding hand from the federal government, and it was every free market capitalist's worst nightmare by today's standards. Many companies were told what they would be producing and how much of it they would be producing, and how much they would be paying their labor force. American citizens got ration books and stamps and were only allowed to buy specific amount of staple consumer items like bread and sugar, and if you wanted to buy a car or gasoline, you had to justify a need to the government. Most consumer items that came in metal containers, which was like everything back then, could not be purchased again unless you recycled the container first. This rationing more or less lasted until 1947, and into the 1950s, fellas like Elon and Bezos would have had their income taxed as much as 92%. And again, yes, in modern times, this sounds like a capitalist's worst nightmare, but it resulted in a 37% growth over the next decade and made America the richest country on earth. It is now literally referred to as the golden age of American capitalism. And despite a few brief bumps in the road, things just kept growing.
It's called You Are Witnessing the Death of American Capitalism. And it's on Ben Jordan's channel. And he's a musician, pretty damn good. He has lots of good music. And he does such a good job of explaining the capitalism side of things uh, in 42 minutes. It's so well done. And I just ramble on and on and on, spinning off on this topic, spinning off on that topic, billions and billions of topics, running around in circles, boring people to tears. And it's sad, but true. And there's a limited amount of time I'm going to spend today. editing this stuff. All right, it's 7:47 in Portugal. That's coffee, not beer. Beer is from much later. But just on an aside, these days I don't like to drink too late. You know, if I'm going to have a drink with a friend, I want to meet in the afternoon because I'm getting old. I don't want to go to bed drunk. I don't want to go to bed tipsy. You know, I don't sleep well. So give myself some time. If I have a glass of wine or a beer with a friend in the afternoon, I can metabolize that alcohol. And by the time I go to sleep at night, it's all out of my system and I can sleep well. So that's coffee, folks. Coffee in the morning. One big, huge pint of it with cloves and cinnamon and 99% dark chocolate. It'll keep you going for days. It's good stuff. Brain fuel for whatever little brain I have left. So, yeah, I've got my George Galloway thing going on today. Love him or hate him, okay? Big deal. he's got his hats. He's got his certain way of expressing himself through fashion, style. I'm not going to go into the Scottish accent, but that would be fun. And I already produced copious amounts of notes with my various AI tools and Google and search engines and stuff. But even if you're using your tools, whether it's a card catalog in a library or generative AI or an LLM or whatever, you still have to know what you're looking for. You still have to ask those questions. What do I want? Why do I want it? How am I going to get there? What's the purpose of this inquiry? What am I trying to do here? And I don't want to argue with people. I don't want to try to convince you of anything. I just find these ideas interesting and I like to share them. So this guy, Stahl, he wrote this book called The Against Crisis, and it's an interesting book. I got to thinking this morning how history and different thinkers and periods of history inform the golden age, right? So this person I'm aware of, it's like a radio show, a community radio show, but it's on YouTube. And it deals with news in Portugal and weather and ice stuff and ideas, general topics. And I engaged with him a little bit. And on Substack, he asked me what I considered to be the American Golden Age. But the point is, it's a complex question for me because I want to contextualize it. You know, what do you mean by that? And then if I know what he means by that, I have to choose a golden age based on certain criteria. What would that be? And what am I looking at? What class of people? What part of the United States? Is it rural? Is it Arkansas, the Ozark Mountains? Is it New York City? You know, the same thing with golden ages like the Jazz Age. Wouldn't I like to have been a fly on the wall in the 1920s in Paris?
In Paris, she could be her real self without having to invent a false one.
Or Chicago. I mean, man, that would be outrageously interesting. But you know, certain people are making money hand over fist, and there's kind of a sense that everybody knows what's going on and what newspapers to read, where to get their information, and what their life's about, whether you're a worker or whether you're a capitalist, you know, an owner of the means of production, or a business person, petty bourgeoisie, whatever, however you want to characterize your class, your position. And again, you're thinking about the 60s, free love and all that stuff, the music. But you still had the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement, and aspects of that is just brutal. It's horrific. You know, all these political assassinations, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, JFK, Bobby Kennedy, on and on and on. And then you have the Weathermen and other anarchist movements blowing things up. Ted Kaczynski look like a pussy. And you have, the Black Panthers and all these things going on. It's tumultuous. Vietnam War, for God's sake, people are dodging the draft, And you're wondering, what's this all about? Eastern religion coming into play. And this is after a golden age that occurred, that's characterized as a golden age during FDR's thing, the New Deal. And then, after World War II, around 47 into the 50s, there was tremendous growth in the economy. And it was called a golden age. And, I think of the TV show Mad Men starting in the 50s, right? Everything's not clear cut. Who are we talking about? But anyway, it seemed like the economy was going strong. People knew who they were as Americans and this and that, the other thing. And, corporations were taxed at 15 or 20%, I forget. And personal wealth was taxed 70 to 90%. I mean, Bezos and Musk would be taxed like crazy. And Jordan gets into that stuff in his video, so I won't repeat it here. But I find it interesting how these things go together. I mentioned in my other video that, socialism and communism, bugaboo words, scary, oh my God. And I found a really nice Hillsdale College, which is a Christian college, and they have a propaganda course about socialism, communism. No, it just won't work. And they trot out all the usual tropes and
the goals that socialists are trying to achieve are noble.
The rhetoric of socialism is attractive. It speaks of a humane ideal.
Marx, like Marxists and communists after him, were answering some pretty fundamental questions to the human condition.
Marx believed that vast inequalities of wealth would lead to inequalities of power. The secret to Marxism is he was right when considering a profane liberal society.
What human history shows is people like having their own things. Actual socialism, the denial of private property and rights, doesn't work economically and produces human misery.
Marxist socialism was the prevailing ideology in one of the most powerful countries in the world, the Soviet Union.
Stalin took very seriously the idea that socialism needs to transform human nature, and any leftovers of self-interest need to be cleansed out of human nature.
What the privileged elites were being told to do was in conformity with an ideology which was like a religion. The beneficiaries were not ordinary people.
Attempting to eliminate all evils actually means you have to commit terrible, terrible evils, and you never get to a better place either.
Anybody that was not willing to do what they needed to do to carry out their role in this new socialist economy would be dispensed with.
The journey that you're about to go on will teach you how Marxism became one of the most compelling and attractive ideologies of our time.
The central questions of this series are: what is communism? Why has it been so enduringly popular? And can it be good? Can it ever work?
Socialism is still alive and competing in the contemporary moment for power.
The dream itself, the goal itself, complete abolition of human self-interest, is completely at odds with human nature. It was a failure, and it has to be a failure, and always will be.
Propaganda narrative about how it just doesn't work. According to certain ideologues, capitalism is the be-all and end-all. And libertarian or neoliberal capitalism, or even now, anarcho-capitalism or accelerationist capitalism, is the thing, right? And it's the only thing that produces progress or anything of value for the world. You can't be a free human being without capitalism. It's this Ayn Randian, train of thought. So anyhow, obviously there are so many resources dealing with socialism and capitalism, and just because it, quote unquote, hasn't worked historically anywhere, it just creates trouble. Again, you have to say why. Why doesn't it work? When there are these more socialist political projects in the world, American business, global business, goes down and kills it, literally. Thinking Pinochet and things like that, right? Anyway, nobody's better than the other guy, really, when you think about it, because whatever kinds of mayhem the Soviets did to themselves, or Stalin did to the people of Russia and to people of the Soviet Union, you can also see parallels in the West. And historically, if you want to go back to the beginning of civilization, 8,000 years ago, or whatever, you want to talk about Cro-Magnon man versus Neanderthals, you can go back and you can see the violence and the changes in culture. You can examine it anthropologically. Why are these mass graves here? What were they doing? All the men were killed from violence. That was the Y chromosome, bottleneck. But really, we're not really empowered to explore any other way of doing things, because the way things are organized and structured, the system that we have, pushes wealth and power and control right up to a small percentage of people who know how to play the great game. And I'm expanding the definition of the great game from the geopolitical competition between the Russian Empire and the British Empire and so on, back at the end of the 19th and early 20th century, to including just this rapacious competition for global control and power that we've seen throughout history. And this includes, obviously, imperialism and colonialism, which are, to some people, bugaboo words, just like socialism and communism. So people talk about eco-socialism. What the hell are they talking about? That sounds really scary. So this guy Holgerson starts to talk about, eco-fascism and fascism and other things that are going on in the world. And I decided I was going to put this all together in a series of videos, trying to keep it short. So I've gone 16 minutes already. And no script. I don't have my glasses on. I'm just rambling. But anyhow, I want to talk about, Spinoza and the New Deal and this book, When Corporations Ruled the World, which came out, by the way, in the late 90s and was reprinted and updated in, I think it was 2015 or something. But it's an excellent book. And it covers everything. It's like we've known about how people are, human nature, from so many angles since the ancient times, right? And we've approached it, different thinkers and philosophers and spiritualists and religious leaders, politicians, political philosophers, individuals, revolutionaries, workers, other organizations from multiple perspectives and points of view forever and ever and ever, and we still don't get it. We're still stuck in the same cycles, and we're still just as ignorant as we ever were. I mean, forget about the printing press and, all that kind of thing, any mode or means of communication, whether it's YouTube or books or newspapers, or radio, telegraph, even though more people than ever engage with this information, we have all kinds of great tools for accessing and organizing really good information. And again, that's another conversation. What's good? What's bad? And you have to ask yourself those questions, and put it in a context so you know where you're standing, what you're defending, what it is you want, what you're trying to advocate, and so on, or fight against. Anyhow, I want to read this one little bit here. Baruch Spinoza, okay? He was 1632 to 1677, a Dutch philosopher of Portuguese Sephardi Jewish origin. And that's an interesting history. I'm in Portugal. So the original Jewish, diaspora and Sephardic Judaism and even language, I'm not talking about Yiddish, evolved and kind of emerged in the Iberian Peninsula long ago. And then eventually the Portuguese kicked them all out. Today, in 2025, the Portuguese government invites any Sephardi Jew who can prove their origin, who they are. They offer them citizenship. You could move here just like, Israel has that thing. You're a Jew, prove you're a Jew, or you want to be a Jew and come to greater Israel and let's make paradise. So anyway, he's one of my favorite philosophers. He's one of the rationalists, Descartes, Leibniz. These people are awesome to me. I understand, Cartesian worldview and all that kind of materialism, scary. But in my view of things, everything in a Spinoza kind of way stems from great nature, from the laws of physics, the physical attributes of the universe. And, so call me a Carl Sagan wannabe or whatever, but try to think without a brain. I mean, you can imagine life after death, and your brain is dead and rotted away or burned and up, and your ashes scattered in the Mediterranean or whatever, and you're gonna think. Now, if you believe in ghosts and whatever and spirits, that's okay. I can't disprove that they don't exist. And I have feelings for them, and I can imagine them, and so on. I don't, like I said in my other video, I don't seem to have that religion gene where I just can talk to God effortlessly all day long and have that kind of theory of spirit as opposed to theory of mind. where I'm literally talking to ghosts and believing that this other ethereal, transcendental realm exists and imagining it and having conversations with it and so on and so forth. I can't say it doesn't exist, okay? I don't know. Nobody knows that much about the universe. It's going to take us many thousands of generations to really understand how the universe works. And I don't think we're going to get there for reasons that I've described before, that I think that our way of life on Earth is self-terminating. There's tons of literature on that, and whether you like it or not, it's kind of true. So 22 minutes, oh my God. So he argued very great arguments about ethics and metaphysics, epistemology, psychology, ethical systems, and so on. And he is extremely influential. And I would really recommend that everybody read Spinoza. He's just such a fascinating character. And today, with the kind of, we still have this conflict between people who are religious or spiritual and people who are secularists or secular humanists, or people who are agnostic or atheist, which just simply means that, they're not theists. They just don't believe in a theistic worldview. They just don't see it, They're not against religion, I don't think, but, I'm not talking about the four horsemen of the, whatever they're called, four horsemen, the intellectual dark web, and Christopher Hitchens and Daniel Dennett and Sam Harris and, that whole clique. I'm not talking about that type of thing. That's kind of, we're over it, but we're coming around again. We're revolving around back to this theistic period, magical thinking. And, you look at the United States, and never mind, that's another thing. But I want to read a little blurb here that I jotted down this morning I was thinking about, and it's relevant to what's going on today. All of this discussion, these subjects that I want to bring up in these next few videos are relevant to what's going on today. Whether you're a retired person in Portugal or a young person trying to figure out how you're going to navigate the future within the confines of the polycrisis, which is a real thing and it's not going away. So when people are afraid, they become more submissive. When weighed down by suffering, it becomes harder to find alternatives. Realizing these truths is a recognition of how social and political systems function. Religious systems, governments, corporations, modern markets, and other power structures have long understood that a population occupied with its own fears is easier to control than one that feels empowered and secure. The mechanisms of control operate in both evident and subtle means. Consider how power structures generate fear through economic uncertainty, social exclusion, and threats of punishment. Anxiety thrives in environments of uncertainty and information overload. Physical and psychological pain drains our energy and narrows our focus to immediate relief rather than broader questioning or resistance. These emotional states aren't simply emotional reactions to life experiences. Our global, radical, libertarian form of capitalism actually cultivates a disempowered population unable to make sound choices with conviction. The messaging we receive from various sources reinforces these emotions. We are emotional instruments influential players play to maintain their power and control. Be afraid of the future. Worry about what others think. Accept suffering as inevitable, or find ways to deaden the pain that further pacify and domesticate your reasoning. Add this to supernormal stimuli, addictions to everything from gambling, drugs, online gaming, social media, and information, and we have a problem. Can we live with serenity and less reactivity in a healthy world fit for life and posterity? So you have the reactionary forces, revolutionary forces, and this type of thing, democratic forces. Right now, we're in the throngs of a new wave of reactionary forces, and it's really it's having a resurgence now, and it's extremely worrisome, but not unpredictable. I mean, we should have seen it coming, and many of us did a long time ago. But people don't care because they're having a fairly good time. They're having their own golden age, so they don't care to pay attention to any of it. So I'm going to stop now before I hit 30 minutes. I want to talk about the New Deal, and I want to talk about the book When Corporations Ruled the World, as I mentioned earlier, because it's a really good book. And, a lot of these books, just like the Club of Rome publication, Limits to Growth, that came out in the 70s, we've known about these things for so long, and we've had this struggle for so long. And critiques of capitalism go back to the 19th century. And we still don't get it. We're completely under the control of various propaganda instruments, public relations, info wars, info flows. And we don't have the autonomy and the agency and the critical thinking skills to be able to empower ourselves and push back against these forces. They just get more and more powerful. And as they get more and more powerful, ecocide, genocide, the omnicidal heat engine we call modern techno-industrial civilization keeps chugging forward, moving faster and faster. None of us can keep up with it. Most of the things in the world around us are black boxes. We don't understand them. We're not engineers. We're not technologists. We're not scientists. We're not chemists, and so on. We're not epidemiologists, virologists, or anything like that. We're just people, and we're caught up in the culture wars. And it's a huge distraction that doesn't do us any good whatsoever. I've had so many golden ages, but that's just because I'm a lucky guy. I'm just freaking lucky. And I've stumbled into opportunities that took me to places around the world where I experienced incredibly wonderful eras within my life that I can look back on and think of as golden ages. But I don't think that everyone in the world has experienced that. I'm just very, very lucky. But I still think a lot of people in the wealthy North are still believing they're in a golden age because progress to them simply means, better stuff, and some, social issues, And then there's pushback from the other side, the conservative side, about how all that's bad. Okay, sorry, I rambled again. Have a good day. William T. out.